Welcome back to Tales of Fantasy. Tonight we drift once more beyond the shoreline into the quiet and endless expanse of the open sea. Here, far from land, the world feels different. The horizon stretches without interruption, and the water moves in slow, steady rhythms that seem untouched by time. In this place, where distance softens sound, and the surface reflects the pale light of the sky, the ocean has long held stories that are not easily explained. For as long as people have traveled across the sea, there have been accounts of something more than wind and water. Sailors alone beneath the vast skies have spoken of moments when the air felt unusually still, when the waves moved gently without disturbance, and when a soft sound, faint at first, began to carry across the water. Not the cry of seabirds, nor the creaking of wood or rope, but something softer, something almost like a voice. It is from these quiet and uncertain moments that one of the most enduring legends of the sea has taken shape. The legend of sirens. Unlike other beings of the oceans, sirens are not always clearly seen. In many of the earliest stories, they are known not by their appearance, but by their presence. A sound carried across the water, a melody that seems to rise and fall with the tide itself. Those who have claimed to hear it often describe it as something difficult to define. It is not loud, nor overwhelming. Instead, it is a calm, almost gentle, yet impossible to ignore once it's been noticed. The song does not command attention, it invites it. In ancient traditions, particularly those surrounding the Odyssey, sirens were described as beings whose voices held a powerful and dangerous pull. Sailors who heard their songs would feel drawn towards them, steering their ships away from the safe waters and towards unseen dangers. The sea itself, calm on the surface, would conceal jagged rocks or shifting currents beneath, and by the time the danger had become clear, it was often too late. Yet, even in these early accounts, there is something quiet and almost contemplative in the way the sirens are described. They do not chase, they do not force, they simply sing, and the rest unfolds on its own. Over time, the image of sirens began to shift. In some traditions, they were no longer imagined as distant, unseen voices, but as figures resting along the edges of the sea. Perched on rocks where the waves meet the shore, or hidden among coastal cliffs where the wind carries sound across the water. They are often described with human features, their forms still and composed, their presence blending so naturally with the landscape that they are almost difficult to distinguish from it. Their hair is said to move gently in the sea air, and their eyes reflect the muted colors of the ocean, calm and distant. Yet it is always their voices that remain the most refining part of their legend. The song of a siren is never fully explained. Some say it is beautiful beyond words. Others say it is not beauty alone, but something more personal. Something that feels familiar. Those who hear it do not describe it the same sound. Instead, the song seems to change, shaped by the listener. It becomes what they most long to hear, a memory, a voice, a sense of belonging that feels just out of reach. In this way, the siren song is not simply a melody carried across the sea, but a reflection of something deeper, something present within the mind. Perhaps this is what makes the legend so enduring. The danger is not only in the sea, it is in the way the song is understood. In many stories, the moment of encounter is not sudden or dramatic. A ship moves steadily across the calm water. The sky is clear, the wind is light, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changes. A sound begins to form, carried faintly across the surface of the sea. At first, it blends with the movement of the waves, barely noticeable. But over time, it becomes clearer, more defined, until it stands apart from everything else. Once it is heard, cannot be unheard. The listener turns towards it, drawn not by force, but by a quiet certainty that the sound holds something important. The ship begins to shift its course, almost without intention. The shoreline, once distant, grows closer. The water becomes shallower, and the movement of the waves more uneven. Yet, even then, the song continues, calm, steady, unchanging. In some versions of the legend, there are ways to resist. Stories speak of sailors who blocked their ears, or who bound themselves to their ships to prevent themselves from following the sound. These moments suggest an understanding, even in ancient times, that the pull of the sirens was not something external alone, but something that required awareness to overcome. Still, the stories rarely focus on escape. They focus on the experience itself, the stillness of the sea, the quiet clarity of the song, the sense of something just beyond reach. As the legend continues, the sirens remain where they have always been, at the boundary between the known and the unknown. They are not creatures of the deep ocean in the way mermaids are often imagined. Instead, they exist at the edges, where the land and the sea meet, where sound carries most easily, and where the distance between worlds feels the smallest. In this way, they represent something different, not the mystery of what lies beneath the surface, but the uncertainty of what lies just beyond perception. Even now, long after these stories were first told, the ocean continues to create movements that feel too difficult to explain. Sound travels differently across the water. A voice carried on the wind can seem closer than it is, or shift in directions without warning. The rhythm of the wave can create patterns that feel almost deliberate, as though the sea itself is speaking in a language that cannot be understood. It is easy in these moments to see how such legends began. A distant sound, a calm horizon, a feeling that something is present just beyond sight. And in that place, where certainty fades and imagination begins, the idea of sirens continues to linger. Not as something loud or immediate, but as something quiet and persistent. A voice carried across the water, a song that waits to be heard. So if you ever find yourself near the sea, especially in those rare moments when the air is still and the waves move gently without urgency, take a moment to listen. Not for anything obvious, but for something softer, something that seems to rise and fall with the tide. Because the old stories suggest that these sirens have never truly disappeared. They remain where they have always been, at the edges of the world, where sound and silence meet. And on certain nights, when the conditions are just right, their voices may still carry across the water, quiet and distant, waiting for those who are willing to listen just a little more closely. This next passage comes from one of the oldest recorded legends of the sea, drawn from the Odyssey by Homer. an ancient Greek epic poem dating back thousands of years. Within this story, the hero Odysseus is warned of many dangers that lie along his journey home, but few are as quiet or as deceptive as the sirens. Unlike monsters that rise from the depths or storms that gather on the horizon, the sirens are known only by their voices. Their song carries gently across the water, reaching those who pass by, not with force, but with something more subtle. What follows is the moment Odysseus is warned of their presence, and what awaits any who choose to listen. First, you will come to the sirens, who will bewitch all men who come near them. If any man draws near and hears the voice of the sirens, his wife and children will never welcome him home again, for the sirens sit in a green field and sing with a clear, sweet voice. Around them is a great heap of bones of men, whose skin has shriveled upon them. Therefore pass these sirens by, and stop your men's ears with softened wax, so that none of them may hear. But if you yourself wish to listen, then have them bind you hand and foot in the swift ship standing upright against the mast, and the ropes fastened tightly, so that you may hear the song of the sirens. And if you beg and command your men to release you, then they must bind you even more tightly still. And as Odysseus sailed on, the sea lay calm around him, and the ship moved steadily forward. Then the sirens lifted their voices and began to sing. "Come here," they called, "renowned Odysseus, great glory of Achaeans, turn your ship towards us and listen to our song. For no one has ever passed by this way without hearing the sweetness of our voices. And whoever listens goes on his way wiser, knowing more than before. For we know all things that have happened in Troy, and all that shall come to pass upon the earth." This next passage comes from Argonautua, an ancient Greek epic by Apollonius of Rhodes, written in the 3rd century BC. Like the Odyssey, it follows a great sea journey, this time led by Jason and the crew of Argo as they search for the Golden Fleece. Along their voyage, they too pass through the waters of the Sirens, but unlike Odysseus, who is bound to hear their song, the Argonauts face a siren in a different way. In this telling, the danger is not resisted through restraint, but answered with a sound of its own. What follows is the moment their ship draws near and the voices begin to carry across the sea. And when the breeze carried them near the island, where the clear-voiced sirens dwell, the sound of their song drifted over the water, sweet and unbroken, rising above the quiet movement of the sea. So enchanting was their music that the sailors were ready to cast their oars aside and guide the ship towards the shore, drawn by the promise within the sound. But Orpheus, son of Ogyges, lifted his lyre and began to play. His music rang out clear and strong, weaving through the air and rising above the song of the sirens. The melody filled the hearts of the crew, steadying their minds and holding them fast to their course. And so the voices of the sirens faded behind them, lost to the distance, as the ship moved safely across the open sea. This next passage comes from Bibliotheca, a mythological collection attributed to Pseudo-Apollodorus, written to preserve the stories and genealogies of the ancient Greek world. Unlike the great epics, this work records the nature of myth more directly, offering brief but enduring descriptions of what the figures, like the sirens. Here they are not encountered in passing, but described as they were understood to exist, shaped by their origins and their place within the world. The sirens were daughters of the river Oceanus and the muse Melpomene. Some say their numbers was 2, others 3. Their forms were not wholly human, for they were part bird and part woman. They dwelt upon an island, and with the sweetness of their song they drew sailors towards them. Those who listened were overcome, forgetting all else, and their ships were brought to ruin upon the rocks. It is said that the sirens were fated to perish if any man passed by them without yielding to their song. And so, when Odysseus sailed beyond them and escaped their call, they were overcome and cast themselves into the sea. This final passage comes from Metamorphosis by Ovid, a Roman poet whose work weaves together stories of transformation and myth. Within these accounts are quieter explanations, moments that suggest how certain beings came to be, shaped by loss, change, and time. In this telling, the sirens are not only voices upon the sea, but something that was once different, altered into what they would become. They were once companions of Persephone, daughters of the river, who wandered the meadows together in the early days. But when Persephone was taken and carried away into the underworld, they searched for her across the land and shores, calling out her name over the wide earth. And when their search brought them at last to the edges of the sea, they prayed for the means to cross the waters in their grief. Then their bodies were changed. Feathers grew out where their arms had been, and wings carried them above the waters, while their faces remained as they were before. And so they came to dwell between the land and sea, their voices carrying across the water, still searching, still calling, long after the one they sought was gone. But not all siren stories belong to the distant past. Some feel closer, quieter, as though they could slip unnoticed into our world. Tales where the line between truth and myth begin to soften, and the sea no longer feels far away. Tonight's story drifts from a more recent time, yet it carries the same haunting stillness. Drawn from the early 20th century, The Story of the Siren by E.M. Foster invites us to a world where something ancient lingers just beneath the surface, unseen, but not entirely forgotten. So settle in and listen closely. Few things have been more beautiful than my notebook on the Diaz controversy as it fell downward towards the waters of the Mediterranean. It dived like a piece of black slate, but opened soon, disclosing leaves of pale green, which quivered into blue. Now it had vanished. Now it was a piece of magical India rubber stretching out to infinity. Now it was a book again, but bigger than the book of all knowledge. It grew more fantastic as it reached the bottom, where a puff of sand welcomed it and obscured it from view, but it reappeared, quite sane, through a little tremulous, lying decently open on its back, while unseen fingers fidgeted amongst its leaves. "It's such a pity," said my aunt, "that you will not finish your work in the hotel. Then you would be free to enjoy yourself, and this never would have happened." "Nothing of it but will change into something rich and strange," warbled the Champlain, while his sister said, "Why, it's gone into the water." As for the boatmen, one of them laughed, while the other, without a word of warning, stood up and began to take his clothes off. "Holy Moses!" cried the colonel. "Is the fellow mad?" "Yes, thank him, dear," said my aunt. "That is to say, tell him he is very kind, but perhaps another time. All the same, I do want my book back," I complained. "It's for my fellowship dissertation. There won't be much left of it by another time." "I have an idea," said some woman or the other through her parasol. "Let us leave this child of nature to dive for the book while we go on to the other grotto. We can land him either on this rock or on the ledge inside, and he will be ready when we return." The idea seemed good, and I improved it by saying I would be left behind too, to lighten the boat. So the two of us were disposed outside the little grotto on the great sunlit rock that guarded the harmonies within. Let us call them blue, though they suggest rather the spirit of what is clean, cleanliness passed from domestic to the sublime, the cleanliness of all the sea gathered together and radiating light. The blue grotto at Capri contains only more blue water, not bluer water. The color and the spirit is the heritage of every cave in the Mediterranean into which the sun can shine and the sea can flow. As soon as the boat left, I realized how imprudent I had been to trust myself on a sloping rock with an unknown silicon. With a jerk, he became alive, seizing my arm and saying, "Go to the end of the grotto, and I will show you something beautiful." He made me jump off the rock, onto the ledge over a dazzling creek of the sea. He drew me away from the light till I was standing on the tiny beach of sand, which emerged like powdered turquoise at the further end. There he left me with his clothes and returned swiftly to the summit of the entrance rock. For a moment he stood naked in the brilliant sun, looking down at the spot where the book lay. Then he crossed himself, raised his hands above his head, and died. If the book was wonderful, the man is past all description. His effect was that of a silver statue, alive beneath the sea, through whom life throbbed in blue and green. Something infinitely happy, infinitely wise, but it was impossible that it should emerge from the depths sunburnt and dripping, holding the notebook on the deist controversy between its teeth. A gratuity is generally expected by those who bathe. Whatever I offered, he was sure to want more, and I was disinclined for an argument in a place so beautiful and also so solitary. It was a relief that he should stay in conversational tones. In a place like this one might see the siren. I was delighted with him for thus falling into the key of his surroundings. We had been left together in a magic world, apart from all the commonplaces that are called reality. A world of blue whose floor was the sea, and whose walls and roof of rock trembled with the sea's reflection. Here, only the fantastic would be tolerable, and it was in that spirit that I echoed his words. One might easily see the siren. He watched me curiously while he dressed. I was parting the sticky leaves of the blue notebook as I sat on the strip of land. "Ah," he said at last, "you may have read the little book that was printed last year. Who would have thought that our siren would have given the foreigners pleasure?" I read it afterwards. Its account is not unnaturally incomplete, in spite of there being a woodcut of the young person and the words of her song. "She comes out of this blue water, doesn't she?" I suggested, and sits on the rock at the entrance, combing her hair. I wanted to draw him out, for I was interested in his sudden gravity, and there was a suggestion of irony in his last remark that puzzled me. "Have you ever seen her?" "Often and often." "I have never." "But you have heard her sing." He put on his coat and said impatiently, "How can she sing under the water? Who could? She sometimes tries, but nothing comes from her but great bubbles." "She should climb onto the rock then." "How could she?" he cried again, quite angrily. "The priests have blessed the air so she cannot breathe it, and have blessed the rocks so she cannot sit upon them. But the sea no man can bless, because it is too big and always changing. Therefore she lives in the sea." I went silent. At this, his face took a gentler expression. He looked at me as though something was on his mind, and going out to the entrance rock, gazed at the external blue. Then returning into our twilight, he said, "As a rule, only good people see the siren." I made no comment. There was a pause, and he continued, "That is a very strange thing, and the priests do not know how to account for it. For she, of course, is wicked. Not only those who fast and go to Mass are in danger, but even those who are merely good in daily life. No one in the village had seen her for 2 generations. I am not surprised. We all cross ourselves before we enter the water, but it is unnecessary. Giuseppe we thought was safer than most. We loved him, and many of us he loved. But that is all different thing to being good. I asked who Giuseppe was. That day, I was 17 and my brother was 20, and a great deal stronger than I was. And it was the year when the visitors who have brought such prosperity and so many alterations into the village first began to come. One English lady in particular, of very high birth, came and has written a book about the place, and it was through her that the Improvement Syndicate was formed, which is about to connect the hotels with the stations by means of funicular railway. Don't tell me about the lady in there, I observed. That day we took her and her friends to see the grottos. As we rode under the cliffs, I put out my hand, as one does, and caught a little crab, and having pulled off its claws, offered it as a curiosity. The ladies groaned, but a gentleman was pleased and held out money. Being inexperienced, I refused it, saying that his pleasure was sufficient reward. Giuseppe, who was rowing behind, was angry with me and reached out with his hand and hit me on the side of the mouth, so that a tooth cut my lip and I bled. I tried to hit him back, but he was always too quick for me, and as I stretched round, he kicked me under the armpit, so that for a moment I could not even row. There was a great noise among the ladies, and I heard afterwards that they were planning to take me somewhere away from my brother and train me as a waiter. That all of the events never came to pass. When we reached the grotto, not here, but a larger one, the gentleman was very anxious that one of us should dive for money, and the ladies consented, as they sometimes do. Giuseppe, who had discovered how much pleasure it gives foreigners to see us in the water, refused to dive for anything but silver, and the gentleman threw in a 2-lira piece. Just before my brother sprang off, he caught sight of me holding my bruise and crying, for I could not help it. He laughed and said, "This time, at all events, I shall not see the siren," and went into the blue water without crossing himself. But he saw her. He broke off and accepted a cigarette. I watched the golden entrance rock and the quivering walls and the magic water through which great bubbles constantly rose. At last he dropped his hot ash into the ripples and turned his head and said, he came up without the coin. We pulled him into the boat, and he was so large that he seemed to fill it, and so wet that we could not dress him. I have never seen a man so wet. I and the gentleman rowed back, and we covered Giuseppe with sacking and propped him up in the stern. He was drowned then, I murmured, supposing that be the point. He was not. He saw the siren, I told you. I was silenced again. We put him to bed, though he was not ill. The doctors came and took money, and the priest came and took more, and smothered him with incense, and spattered him with holy water, but it was no good. He was too big, like a piece of the sea. He kissed the thumb bones of the San Biago, and they never dried till evening. What did he look like? I ventured. Like anyone who had seen the siren. If you had seen her often and often, how is it you do not know? Unhappy, unhappy, unhappy. Because he knew everything. Every living thing made him unhappy, because he knew it would die, and all he cared to do was to sleep. I bent over my notebook. He did no work. He forgot to eat. He forgot whether he had his clothes on. All the work fell on me, and my sister had to go out to service. We tried to make him into a beggar, but he was too robust to inspire pity. And as for an idiot, he had not the right look in his eye. He would stand in the street looking at people, and the more he looked at them, the more unhappy he became. When a child was born, He would cover his face with his hands. If anyone was married, he was terrible then, and would frighten them as they came out of the church. Who would have believed that he would marry himself? I caused that. I was reading out of the paper how a girl, Aragusa, had gone mad after bathing in the sea. Giuseppe got up, and in a week he and that girl came together. He never told me anything, but it seems he went straight to her house, broke into her room, and carried her off. She was the daughter of a rich mine owner, so you might imagine our peril. Her father came down with a clever lawyer, but they could do no more than I. They argued and they threatened, but at last they had to go back, and we lost nothing. That is to say, no money. We took Giuseppe and Maria to the church and had them married. Ugh, that wedding. The wicked priest made no jokes afterwards, and coming out the children threw stones. I think I would have died to make her happy, but as always, one could do nothing. Were they unhappy together then? They loved each other, but love is not happiness. We can all get love. Love is nothing. Love is everywhere since the death of Jesus Christ. I had 2 people to work for now, for she was like him in everything. One never knew which of them was speaking. I had to sell our own boat and work under the bald man. Ooh, you have to thing. Worst of all, people began to hate us. The children first. Everything begins with them, and then the women, and at last the men. For the cause of every misfortune was, "You will not betray me?" I promised good faith, and immediately he burst into the frantic blasphemy of those who had escaped from supervision, cursing the priest, the lying, filthy, cheating, immoral priest who had ruined his life, who had murdered his brother and the girl, whom he dared not to murder back because they held the key of heaven and could ruin him in the next life too. Thus we are tricked, was his outcry, and he stood up and kicked at the aztar ripples at his feet, till he had obscured them with a cloud of sand. I too was moved. The story of Giuseppe, for all its absurdity and superstition, came nearer to reality than anything I had known before. I don't know why, but it filled me with desire to help others. The greatest of all our desires, I suppose, and the fruitless. The desire soon passed. She was about to have a child. That was the end of everything. People said to me, "When will your charming nephew be born? What a cheerful, attractive child he will be, with such a father and mother." I kept my face steady and replied, "I think he may be. Out of sadness shall come gladness," is one of our proverbs, and my answer frightened them very much. And they told the priests, who were frightened too. Then the whisper started that the child would be the Antichrist. You need not be afraid. He was never born. An old witch began to prophesy, and no one stopped her. Giuseppe and the girl, she said, had silent devils who could do little harm, but the child always be speaking and laughing and perverting. And last of all, he would go into the sea and fetch up the siren into the air, and all the world would see her and hear her song. As soon as she sang, the 7 vials would be opened, and the Pope would die, and the mobile flame and the veil of Santa Agata would burn. The boy and the siren would marry, and together they would rule the world forever and ever. The whole village was in tumult, and the hotel keepers became alarmed, for the tourist season was just beginning. They met together and decided that Giuseppe and the girl must be sent inland until the child was born, and they subscribed the money. The night before they were to start, there was a full moon and winds from the east, and all along the coast of the sea shot up over the cliffs in the silver clouds. It was a wonderful sight, and Maria said she must see it once more. "Do not go," I said. "I saw the priest go by and something with him, and the hotel keepers do not like you to be seen, and if we displease them, also we shall starve." "I want to go," she replied. "The sea is stormy, and I may never feel it again." "No, he is right," said Giuseppe. "Do not go, or at least let one of us go with you." "I want to go alone," she said, and she went alone. I tied up their luggage in a piece of cloth, and then I was so unhappy at thinking I should lose them that I went and sat down by my brother and put my arm around his neck, and he put his arm round me, which he had not done for more than a year, and we remained thus. I don't remember how long. Suddenly, the door flew open, and moonlight and wind came in together, and a child's voice said, laughing, "They have pushed her over the cliffs into the sea." I stepped to the drawer where I keep my knives, and the child ran away. "Sit down again," said Giuseppe. Giuseppe, of all people. If she is dead, why should others die too? "I guess who it is," I cried. "I will kill him." I was almost out of the door, but he tripped me up, and kneeling upon me, he took both of my hands and sprained my wrist. First my right one, then my left. No one but Giuseppe would have thought of such a thing. It hurt more than you would suppose, and I fainted. When I woke up, he was gone, and I have never seen him again. But Giuseppe disgusted me. "I told you he was wicked," he said. "No one would have expected him to see the siren." "How do you know he did see her then?" "Because he did not see her often, but once." "Why do you love him if he is wicked?" He laughed for the first time. That was his only reply. "Is that the end?" I asked, feeling curiously ashamed. I never killed her murderer, for by the time my wrists were well, he was in America, and one cannot kill a priest. And as for Giuseppe, he went all over the world too, looking for someone else who has seen the siren, either a man, or better still, a woman, for then the child might have been born. At last he came to Liverpool. "Is the district profitable?" And there he began to cough and spat blood until he died. I do not suppose that there is anyone living now who has seen her. There has seldom been more than one in a generation, and never in my life will there be both a man and woman who that child can be born, who will fetch up the siren from the sea and destroy silence and save the world. Save the world? Did the prophecy end like that? He leaned back against the rock, breathing deep. Through all the blue-green reflections I saw him color. I heard him say, "Silence and loneliness cannot last forever. It may be 100 or 1,000 years, but the sea lasts longer, and she shall come out of it and sing." I would have asked him more, but at that moment the whole cave darkened, and there rode in through its entrance the returning boat. Thank you for drifting with me tonight through these tales of sirens, of longing, and of mysteries that refuse to be forgotten. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and return again to Tales of Fantasy, where more stories wait in the shadows and beneath the waves. Until next time, sleep well and be careful what calls you from the deep.